Caradwena gave it as a gift to Merlin, who later handed it to Arthur, who then fought many bloody battles with it. All of Caradwena's efforts to regain possession of the sword failed because it had been abused. Hence, she was very angry with Merlin but could not persuade him to demand Arthur's sword back and return it to her. It was only after Arthur's death that the sword was reclaimed by Merlin and returned to the Plejaren Caradwena, after which she left Earth. She had already angrily ceased contact with Merlin at the time when Arthur committed his first murderous deeds with the sword. Plejaren is the castle where Merlin lived. Bran Valley was located in the Cymru region where Merlin, the one with great knowledge, was also working. Merlin's real name was Merlin the Laughing One. Merlin, the Druid of Camelot, received his initiation when he was just 9 years old, but he was not a magician and sorcerer, as falsely declared by Christianity, but a well-versed druid in many different fields of knowledge. He was also a bard, a doctor, a teacher, a prophet, a historian, and ultimately the king and prince of druids of the Demeter tribe from South Wales. He taught in the West/Occident on Plejaren Caradwena's the triple goddess, Billy Snout, instructions and had great visionary skills based on his practiced meditations. Merlin's father was King Morvran, and his mother was a daughter of the king of the Demeter. Merlin's father was also a visionary, and these visionary capabilities led to the evil legend within the Christian world that Merlin was a sign of the devil, a magician, a sorcerer. The novelty and simplicity of the Christian interpretation held that Merlin and his father's paranormal abilities meant that they were satanical, and that father and son were allied with the devil and fathered by him. Merlin was born on May 1, 449. He also picked up the sword and fought with it, and he used his skills in military operations and as Arthur's military advisor, contrary to the instruction and wishes of the Plejaren Caradwena, however without becoming morally bankrupt. Merlin also fought with his sword against the warlike Christian intruders who stole into the country through murder and arson, killing off or suppressing the population, to spread the Christian faith, conquer the land and destroy Celtic philosophy and beliefs. After his last fight, when he was 66 years old in year 515, at the lost battle at Arfderid, Merlin fled and settled down in a remote area in the wilderness of Caledonia in the Cheviot Hills, where he lived as Merlin Wild Merlin in the wilderness. He lived there for some time and then returned to his hometown, where an old female druid named Ninian, also known as Namu, joined him and was a good friend to him. When he felt his death approaching, she finally accompanied Merlin on Libardsea Island, which he had chosen as his death place. He died there in the arms of the old druid, on June 14, 542 at the age of 93, and he was buried by the wise woman in a rocky cave according to his wishes. The Knights of the Round Table were malignant, bloody knights and not heroes, as they are presented today. Merlin, being a seer, made prophetic and foresighted statements of which his dragon prophecy made at Dinizemri's fortress of Emrys or Ambrosius respectively, is very well known, besides those which he made in the wilderness of Caledonia. By year 466, Merlin had already been contacted by the Plejaren Caradwena, who, as I mentioned earlier, was a sister of my grandfather Ezekiel the Mediator. This took place after the High Council decided to convey Enoch's teachings to Merlin, which he was to disseminate in order to contain the barbarism of the Celts so that they would refrain from barbarity in their bloody battles. Merlin, being a Celtic druid, was chosen because the High Council hoped that with his help, King Arthur, who, according to Vorausschaut German equals view into the future, was to be born on January 4, 469, would transform Enoch's teachings of love, peace, harmony and the freedom and equality for all people into reality. The real reason for this undertaking was the Celtic philosophy, which in many ways parallels the teachings of Enoch, whose wise, effective and widespread approach should be implemented to make the Celts give up their degenerated behavior of barbaric killings and fighting battles. Merlin received a copy of Enoch's teachings, being the first part of the Goblet of Truth written on earth, memorized it and then locked and sealed it in a cauldron. This cauldron was no vessel made of gold but of bronze and decorated with a ruby the size of a cherry, and 3 small semi-precious stones rose quartz were placed in the shape of a triangle, and in its center the ruby was attached. The 33-centimeter-wide cauldron was meant to collect water from a spring at the Grail. The Grail itself was a sacred place of a spring, usually located on a mountain that the Celts considered a nature sanctuary, and where also a druid's grove was erected that was surrounded by trees and other plants, where the druids meditated in deep consciousness-related interconnection with water, the earth and plants as well as with inexhaustibleness of life. These holy places, which have been called the Grail, were intended as places of meditation for the druids. They were numerous and indeed existed wherever druids lived and fulfilled their obligations. But at the place with the water source, where also Merlin meditated, a vessel was linked to the well, known as the Cauldron of Abundance, which captured the water located at the divine Cheridwin spring. Merlin, the druid from Camelot, removed the Cauldron of Abundance from its place and replaced it with another vessel, because he put a copy of Enoch's teaching into the cauldron which he and all druids then called the Cauldron of Life. Merlin presented his cauldron to his protege and pupil Arthur when he was 16 years old in year 485. After Merlin had thoroughly instructed Arthur and his knighthood in Enoch's teaching, and after Arthur had fought his first battle against Germanic invaders led by the chief El. But Arthur and his bloody knights thirsted for blood and vengeance, and they strictly rejected the teachings because they did not want to give up killing and conquest. Arthur thus became very upset and angry at Merlin and cast the gift of the Cauldron of Life into the sea with his own hands, although he later reconciled with Merlin again. This is the information I can relate to you. Billy says, "Thanks, that's more than I expected. Some of this I still know from your father, Svav." The end.